Good afternoon, all, and welcome to a special edition today. Today is the fifth in our series, and we've got Ryder all the way from Birmingham. Uh, Chris is going to discuss with us on match analysis. I hope you all have seen the email with a link which we've sent you all. Otherwise, eventually, if required in the chat, there is a link. Chris will take you through that. So I'll hand it over to you, Chris. Good morning to you and welcome.
Thanks very much, Cyrus. Thank you very much for asking me to present to you today. Really looking forward to it. Hope everyone else is doing really well and coping with lockdown and looking forward to getting back on a squash court like me. We had a few problems with sound in the introduction, so I'm kind of holding the mic close to my face just in case you wondered what I'm doing. Okay, but let's get started. So today we're going to look at doing some match analysis online, and this is the sort of thing I've been doing with my England junior players. We do it in small groups, like 5 to 10 kids at a time, and I've been doing that a couple of times a week with my kind of elite kids. So we found it really useful, and I was saying that I think it's something that would probably be useful after lockdown as well. So it's kind of worth pursuing. Match analysis is always a good thing to do to have a better knowledge of the players. These days, we're very lucky to have such a kind of wealth of matches on PSA Squash TV and on YouTube as well. And it's much better than it was even 10 years ago. So what I'll do with my players is generally send out the link like we've done today, so they can watch the match. And I'll send it out a day or two beforehand. And I'm hoping that they can do some, like, watch the match at least and come into our conversation with like an opinion on what's happened in the match and who's controlled it, who's played certain shots. And so if they come in with a stronger opinion, they're kind of getting a bit more interaction from my juniors, which is what I want. I want them to talk to me, basically. So the way we're going to structure this today is to start off with, we're going to look at, number one, we're going to look at sort of my golden rules of watching squash. Like the main things you should be looking for yourself and for the kids when you're watching it. Number two is we're going to have a look at how to analyze it, like basic written ways of analyzing match. So this is stuff that can be done with a pen and paper, really not too sort of technical, I suppose. There are lots of technical things you can do these days, heart rate analysis and, yards covered and all this kind of stuff. But we just want it simple that everybody can understand with a pen and paper. And then we're going to look at third thing. Number three is the questions that you should be asking. How you're going to get a bit of an insight, or the questions that your juniors should be asking, what you can ask there, you can prompt them into what we're going to do. So that's kind of my presentation. And then we're going to watch, in my opinion, one of the best matches of the last decade. Maybe ever, really. It was a World Open final between Ramy Ashour and Mohamed El Shabaghi, 2014. They played a couple of World Open finals, and both of them, I think, they went to 5 games, and they're fantastic matches. So I think the 2014 match is marginally the better one. Just an amazing match, and we're going to kind of pick it up in the sort of mid part of the 5th game and watch it for 15 to 20 minutes. I'm going to sort of talk you through how I would have done some of the analysis with some of the kids and what I'm seeing in that match. And then if we've got time at the end, then I take some questions from the chat as well. Okay, so let's start off then with my what I've termed my golden rules. My golden rules for watching squash. So, ready? Number one is when you're watching squash and you're analysing stuff, get kids to write things down. You've got to get kids to write things down. If they're sort of just passively watching the match and enjoying it, that's great. But they're going to be far more engaged if they actually have to try and analyse what's happened, take a load of information and put it into a sentence, or like draw a diagram or whatever we're going to do later, and actually be involved in the match. That's so important that you actually don't just let it wash over you. So what I think of the point of this exercise is that we're trying to get the juniors to develop their sort of squash brain, if you like, the way that they understand squash. And it's a very sophisticated game. It's got a lot of subtleties. For example, weight of shot, hold, changes of lines of attack, changes of pace, even lets and strokes, interference. These days you can have a player review. How would you tactically ask for that? Now, this is too much information to be just kind of absorbing in one game. So if you're not writing these things down, you're going to forget more than you've actually watched. So I would encourage you to write stuff down. That's number one. Okay. Number two is I would always approach a match by focusing on one player at a time. So this allows me to focus on things that I might otherwise miss if I'm just watching both players. So things like the movement off the ball, in particular, tee position, racket preparation, change of pace, the split step, and more importantly, it gives me an idea of how a player will kind of flow around the court. If I haven't watched a match before, then I'll look at both players. I'll just watch the whole thing, and I tend to find which player I'm kind of more attracted to watching is the player that's dominating play a bit more. So then I might go back and rewatch it and just focus on watching that one player, see how they're moving, how they're hitting, what their shot choices are. I think of when I was growing up, and I watched videos of Jancha Khan a lot. I watched hours and hours and hours of Jancha Khan moving around a court, and I would get the video and pause it as he moved off the tee and as he did his split step, and I'd look at where his toes are pointing. I'd look at how big his split step was, how many steps he took to the ball, how his racket helped him come back to the tee, and all these aspects, particularly of movement with Jancha. And to be honest, I can't even remember who his opponents were in these matches, but I genuinely spent hours and hours just watching every little piece of movement and then try and copy it into my own game. So, which brings us on to rule number 3, which is relate it to yourself. So I think clearly this is, it should be pretty obvious, but don't lose sight of why we're doing this. Don't lose sight of why we're doing this. We want to improve our games. We're not just watching this for entertainment. So quite often, you can just watch a match and enjoy it, and then it goes. But we're trying to see what we can get into our game. On the flip side of that, you can kind of try and copy too directly, I suppose. And let's say you enjoy watching, in this example we're going to watch later, Rami's cross-court nicks. I might go and practice Rami's cross-court nicks, but they're never going to help me in my game because I play, I hold the racket differently to him. It doesn't suit my style of play. So I could actually go too far the other ways. But, I suppose that's part of the learning process that we're trying to get these kids through. So relate it to yourselves, number 3. And my final point is try and get kids away from just watching highlights. So on YouTube, there's a load of clips on that PSA Squash TV of highlights reels, best shot of the month, all this kind of stuff. And I would relate that to reading the last page of a novel and not reading the rest of it. I think you are missing the subtleties and the depth of understanding in a match of squash if you just watch some big shots and some unusual shots. I think you'll learn far more from the actual rallying, the subtleties of that, and they're much easier things to relate and put into your game. Although kids like it, but if you actually want to get meaningful stuff from it, then watch the whole match if you can, or watch as much of it. Okay, so those are my 4 kind of golden rules. Write things down, focus on one player at a time, relate it to yourself, and don't just watch the highlights. Okay, so part 2. What was part 2? So my ways of analysing the match. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 ways of analysing the match for junior players, and these are the things that I've sent out and kind of tried to educate my my juniors on doing. Like I say, they're pretty basic, and you just need a pen and paper. And what we've done on conference school, remember there's 5-10 players, is I will encourage the kids to at least have done one game of the match with a written analysis. They don't have to do the whole thing, but at least one game of it. And I've kind of got three main ways of doing that. The first one is pretty simple. I mean, what I might do instead of sharing the screen is 1 second. Here we go. Right, just very simply print it out. You could draw this on an A4 sheet of paper, print it out, a sheet of paper with winners and errors on it. And all I'm going to do is, if Rami plays like a backhand winner from there, I just write it down. Very, very, very simple like that. What the kids tend to do, or what a few of the kids have done, is actually put, like, he's hit a cross-court nick. They put where the ball lands. Maybe they draw a little arrow onto it like that. You know, like, so I don't know if you can see that. Cyrus, can you see that all right? Yeah, so, I mean, then what you'll do is you'll end up with a collection of winners and errors. So you might get a group of winners from here, some errors from down at the bottom, because Rami, for example, doesn't really play many long-range shots, but he does play a lot of backhand volley winners, and then be able to compare, you know, where's he playing that from? I mean, this is clearly not the whole picture, because, you know, there's a lot more to what leads up to that shot, but it's such a simple way of doing it. And I think what it does is it gives kids an understanding of position, you know, where they're not hitting loads of winners from deep in corners. They're not, you know, certain players have certain things they do. So Shabagi's like use of winners will certainly be more on his forehand, more at the front corner on his forehand. Rami will be on the volley, on the backhand in particular. So then that's kind of the main thing. You're kind of identifying a strength. So that's number one. Very, very simple, that one. Number two, I'm going to try and share my screen with you. Let's see if I can do this on technology. Okay, so let's have a go. Right, so can everyone see? Can you see that, Cyrus? Is that all right? So you can see here what I've done is I'd call it an annotated scoreline. So it should have a space between the scores. So that's the time that I've started from. 5-5 in the fifth game. And what I've tried to do is write like a pretty simple sentence of what happens on each rally. So the thing that stands out to me, it might not be what's won the rally. You can sort of see Rami controlling with forehand hold, brutal rally. So much work for Shabagi, that's supposed to read, actually. And then Rami wants to, like, he's putting a really hard rally, he wants to serve quickly, but the crowd are actually like too noisy, so he's trying to quieten them down. And then he uses a flick at the right time, in my opinion, when he's got his opponent tired. So, well, I don't want to give too much of the match away, but you can kind of see what I've done there. And what I feel with that is it gives me a really good kind of story of the game. I'm getting a really good feel of the change of tactics and the change of momentums here and there on that game, and it's just kind of pointing out some deeper things that I can put into my sort of annotation of that. So I like that one the best, and I think then when kids have done that one, it tends to give them a better conversation. We come up with better conversations. Okay, so the next one, I'm going to try and share the next one as well, is what I'd call a player breakdown. Okay, so bear with me a second. So on this one, what I've done is kind of split it into 5 areas. So I've got tactics, mentality, physicality, movement, and technique. And I've kind of given you an idea of what I'm looking for in that. So tactics is pretty obvious. I mean, do they play to certain patterns? Do they, you know, I've put attacking straight under pressure. So we find this in the tie break in the match. Mentality is quite a difficult one to get from a video analysis, because clearly you don't know what they're thinking. But this is what you've got to try and do. Is we've got to try and question your juniors. What do you think they are thinking about? You're looking for obviously body language. Are they panicking? Are they disciplined? You know, have they been willing to change their tactics? Are they stuck in their ways? You know, how are they dealing with certain situations? Physicality. signs of fatigue and kind of looking to apply physical pressure. So obviously that's partly tactical, but we're just looking to see what types of physicality this player brings to it. So more so, I think movement is kind of a really good one to take from ones I was saying about my example with watching a lot of Jantia. But then you get a really good idea of how this player is applying effort to the game, and you're looking for little things like, are they efficient? Where does their split step go? You could tie in some sort of racket prep to that kind of thing. And generally, sort of, do they have any unusual steps? Do they take ball off the wrong foot here and there? That kind of thing that definitely juniors should be looking to improve. And then technique can be a quite difficult one to do when it's so quick in a game. But if you could use something like to sort of like an app, we use Coach's Eye sometimes, and we play things in slow motion. And then it's really useful for being able to show how much they're slicing the ball and cutting through the ball, or maybe how much they shorten their swing, these kind of things. So, there's certain shots they're doing this, or be able to show a short shot and then go long. It's quite a technical thing, or show aggression and then play short. So Shibagi does that quite a bit. So
Chris, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
right, yeah, okay, right, I'm back. Sorry about that. I knew I wasn't great with technology. So I don't know where I got to, but I was basically saying that you could do the same with a SWOT analysis, where strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then what I'd encourage the juniors to do is to try and do it for their own game. Right, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What opportunities I've got to improve? And what are the threats to me, I suppose? The player breakdown, I'd like to see what are my tactical strengths? What am I good at technically? What am I good at mentally? Because there's so many different parts to that. I think people get hung up, especially on the mental side of kind of going, oh, I'm not very good mentally, or I'm good. But there's a lot of different aspects to it. Are you good under pressure? Are you disciplined? Are you good away from the court? Are you good at start of games? Are you good with a lead? Are you good at coming back from behind? There's so many different aspects of that. So that's what you're trying to get out of these players. Okay. So those are my different ways of analysing it. And then before we get on and watch some actual squash, I'm going to sort of delve into, I suppose, the questions that you should be asking your junior players, or that they should be asking themselves, really, or they should be asking you. So I've got 4 questions here. Number 1 is if you're approaching a match or to analyse a match, and I generally have a conversation with kids before the match actually starts, then I'd be saying, what do we know about these players before the match? What's the history of this match? So in this case, we've got Ramy coming into a World Open final, which is slightly ridiculous, having not played a competitive match for 6 months, which is practically, that's never ever happened before. And I don't imagine it will happen very often again. But he had a major hamstring injury for the 20th time, and hadn't played competitively. So it's a really unusual situation. And that's quite tough for Shibagi. So I might ask the kids, how would Shibagi deal with playing a player he hasn't played for a long time? Because he's pretty used to playing most of these players, so things might have changed. Like, he hasn't played this style of player for quite a while. What else do we know? Well, we know that the semi-final for Ramy was pretty tough as well. He had a physically hard match with Gaultier as well. So we might look for signs of fatigue earlier in the match and things like that. Plus, we might discuss their styles of play, with Shibagi being a bit of a physical beast and Ramy being, called the artist, but that's for good reason. He is a beautiful player to watch. So that's number 1, is kind of what are the players' histories coming into the match. Okay, number 2 is, in a match, give a situation and then try and think what the player's thinking in that situation. So this could be, for example, something on the scoreboard, like or it could be something to do with physicality. So a good thing that stands out in the match we're watching here, we're going to watch, we only watched the fifth, but after the first game, Ramy comes back on court and he seems to be carrying a shoulder injury. And it pretty much lasts for a game or a game and a half, and he loses the next two games. And he just sort of plays some unusual shots, and he plays like some drops from the back. We very rarely see that. And he goes in the tin, and he plays some return of serves where he doesn't look interested, and things like that. So he, I think then a good question to ask people is like, how would you cope with playing an injured player? Most of us have played an injured player. What tactics would you change? Would you make the rallies longer? Would you try and be specific and find out what bit of an injury it was? You know, if it wasn't obvious, would you try and attack them? Would you defend to them? You know, how would you play them? And how would you keep focus yourself? Because it's obviously very difficult to keep focus in that situation. That's something that's really worthwhile reflecting on, I think. And this match was quite a good kind of example for that. If you watch the match through, I encourage you to watch this match. It's very good. So that's my second one. So what happens in certain situations or unusual situations? A third one is, again, just a reminder, I suppose, to keep relating it to yourself. You know, I think that obviously, yes, playing against an injured player might be one, but another example might be tie breaks. There's two big tie breaks in this match, including the one in the fifth. And it's kind of interesting to see how the players cope with those situations. They're high pressure, World Open final, tiebreak in the fifth is just about as high pressure as you can get. Now, juniors won't necessarily have to cope with that, but we have to think and ask them, what would you do in a tiebreak situation? Do you have a plan, or do you just play, or like does nothing go through your head? And I can tell you from my experience of playing PSA players that generally the tempo just goes up and up and up towards like 7-all, 8-all, 9-all, 10-all, you know, and it sort of reaches a zenith at the top, and this is where players can really die away. And there's a good reason that a player like Nick Matthew just keeps pushing on from 7-all. A lot of players stay with him to 7-all, and then he just wins a lot of games from there. And there's a reason for that, because he can up the pace and up the pace and up the intensity and up the focus. So when you're looking at that, you're kind of thinking, well, he's got a philosophy which is backed up by a physicality of like he's going to raise the intensity at that point. You know, like, so I think that's a really good thing to kind of get your kids to discuss in a group environment. And generally, what I'll do with the kids is kind of say, look, in a minute, we watch it when it gets to 10-all. I'll say, in a minute, let's have a talk about how you deal with a tiebreak situation. Do you have a plan? You know, do you play with purpose? Do you cut down angles? Do you play it straighter than you would have done otherwise? And then I'll give them a bit of time to watch a few rallies and then kind of ask a couple of kids. I think that's a bit fairer to give them a bit of time to answer that. And then I suppose my fourth point or fourth question I'd like them to be asking, what could I copy from this player in the future? What can I get from this player and put it into my game? And, you know, again, I was kind of fixing on this match here, and I love the example of what Shabaghi does, actually. I know he loses this match, but I love the fact that when he's playing this fifth game, he really sticks to his strengths. He ups the pace at the right time. He's got his fighting spirit. But he also uses his best weapons, which is the front forehand corner. And he's got this very exaggerated, like, big swing, which he can transition into a soft drop shot. And he just keeps using it right at the end of the match when the time's critical. And I just think that's a really good example to juniors that you've got to play to your strengths, especially in a time of crisis. You've just got to play to your strengths. And those are the things that you've got to trust, you know, when the going gets tough. So I think here as well, another example that I might take is the way that Ramy changes his tactics. We'll probably discuss this in a minute, but in the first game, he wins the first game, which is outrageously. He was, I think, 9-5 down in the first game, and he wins it by hitting a ton of backhand cross-court nicks. Now, it's typical Ramy, but realistically, there's not loads of pressure in that first game compared to the fifth game. There is still pressure, obviously, but it's not quite to the same extent in the first game, and he can open up and go for these big shots. Now, compare that to the fifth. He goes for one sort of half-heartedly, loses the rally, then just never does it again. And he finds a different way to attack. And I think that's really interesting to kind of explain to juniors that under real pressure, you might just run it in tight and look for the higher percentage shot. Maybe you're not trying to win it on that shot. Whereas in that first game where you've got less pressure on you, you can go for outright winners. And if you're looking at the best in the world, changing his tactics like that, comparing it to the first game and the fifth game, then I think that's really interesting. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to try and share the screen that I've got the match on. I would say that if you've got access to YouTube, which I guess if you're on your computer, and you could watch it as well, which might stop a bit of buffering. So the problem we've had in our groups of 5 or 6, this is a lot bigger group than 5 or 6, then is that we've had some buffering when we've tried to share the screen. So it hasn't worked so well. So if you want to watch it, then you've got the link there, and we've been watching it from, I've got it at 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 30 seconds. So the score's 5-all with 2 games all and 5-all. And so if you want to, I'll give you a bit of time to find that if you want to on YouTube. And then I'm going to try and share my screen and watch it on mine as well. And if it's not working, if you can't hear me, then just let me know. Okay. Oh, hang on. You've got the whole screen there, haven't you? I want to share that one. Okay. Right. So what I'm going to do is get my notes out that I showed you before. Sort of my annotated scoreline, I suppose, and I'm going to press play here. So I'm going to kind of watch it without the commentary on, because even I do really like the commentary. I think the commentators in squash are absolutely fantastic. You know, Joey Barrington here and Paul Johnson, they're brilliant. But sometimes I really want the kids to form their own opinion there. I love that shot there where Rami shaped to go cross court, shapes to go cross court, and actually cuts across the ball and goes straight there. That's fantastic. 6-5 Rami. Can you see me okay, Cyrus? And you can hear me okay still, can you?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Just put it in full screen, Chris, please. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so I think generally what we're looking at here is kind of this rally in particular is just such a brutal rally for Shibagi as it develops. What I love about it is that Rami there reading a really good shot and doing some great defensive work. I think that's probably an underrated aspect of Rami's game there, isn't it? But he really by the end of it, he starts really getting into Shibagi here. There's a hold and a snap cross court. That's such a controlling shot. Hold and snap cross court on his forehand. Pretty patient stuff. I mean, you very rarely see Rami attack there short from the back. Again, using that hold pretty well. Feels so easy for him there. What a shot that is. Hold, snap. Great stuff here from Rami. And to be fair, Shibagi is playing at a great quality as well. I think this is a 5th game. I think most people have had enough by then. Now he's doing some serious work here, Shibagi. He's covering a lot of court sprints here. Massive power. He's threatened to the back a few times there, actually gone short, and again just on that ball so quick. I think his reading of the game, big rally that. You can see Shabagi's just hurting here. He is really hurting. Now, what I'd be saying to my kids here is, if you've got a player hurting, you might be hurting yourself, but you've got to push at this point. You've got to push. And I think the Egyptians are really taught this. They're taught when you're winning, serve quick, and when you're losing, slow it down a little bit. So you can kind of see Shabagi walking side to side. Right, I just want to slow this down. I want to give myself a bit of room to breathe. And Rami is like, he wants to serve quick, but the crowd is actually going pretty kind of bonkers for him. Most of them, to be fair, are supporting Rami here. So I like the way he's playing the crowd here. And he's kind of, right, I want to serve, I want to serve. Here we go. That, by the way, is a pretty outrageous flick there. A lot of hold, it's almost behind him. But if you're going to flick and you want to do it, like, and open up the court, he doesn't do that shot very often, but you're going to risk it at 7-5. 7-5 when your opponent's so tired. It's a very good pickup there. Another great defensive movement, Rami. Pretty patient down that backhand wall, I think. Again, he realises he got momentum here and just wants to work him. That's a big old tin there from El Shabagi. It's a tired error. I think, to be honest, that's probably the first mistake mentally he's made for a long, long time there, Shabagi. It's deep into a fifth game. This game's really gone away. It's 5-all like less than 2 minutes ago. 9-5. Hold, severe, hold and a boast, hold and severe. So I absolutely love that. 10-5, 5 match balls to win it with 6 months off. A bit of a spoiler alert, but we've got at least another 10 minutes here, which is incredible, really. 10-5, match ball. Pretty much you'd think it's all over here. Somehow, that, I think, is a massive turning point. I think there's a bit of luck there. It's instinctive. I would call that instinctive, that volley drop there. So Shabagi's got a point back, but still 4 match balls for the world title. I think the difference here in what we were saying in our one when I talked about it with my juniors is Rami has sort of stopped doing what he did well to get to match balls. He stopped being as hard hitting. He's gone a little bit passive. I mean, obviously he's very, very tired as well. But there's not really that same kind of threat. And there's a weak attempt at a cross-court nick. And that's the one I was talking about earlier, in that is pretty much the last time he's good. Well, it is the last time he goes for a cross-court nick attempt here. And if you watch the first game, he did that all the time. Like, all the time he was going for that. And then all of a sudden, 2 points back, there's a bit of a sniff of a chance here for Shabagi. Rami's starting to look a bit tired, having a bit of a think, but he's been passive the last couple of rallies. And that is a silly shot. Ill-disciplined. It was a long way above the tin. That was a bit better from Rami. A hold and went across him, but then it was a bit pushy. Didn't take any risks. Right, there's another point. So that's 2 points in a row where Shabagi has used his major strength. So I would probably, there at that point, I'd be rewinding that, looking at this shot. He's shown aggression there for a moment with his swing and then played it very, very soft from a pretty big swing. And Shabagi has basically he's gone to his strengths there. He's really gone to his strengths in a critical time, which I think is so important. $10-8.
Chris, full screen.
Oh, what have I written it? 10-8. Ah, yes. This one, I think, is probably a bit of luck from Shabagi.
Racket full screen, please, Chris. Thank you.
There, he's absolutely got that. Means that's gone millimeters above the tin there. But a bit of luck, but he's had to risk it. It's desperate time, so he's gone for that. And suddenly it's 9-10, and he's back in it. Again, at this point, I'd be asking juniors, like, what do you think Rami's thinking here? what do you think Shabagi's thinking? Like, what would they be doing in their situation? So I think here, Rami's trying to keep his discipline. He's trying to stay really focused, but he's panicking a little bit. So it's panic, panic, panic. And I think that for the first time, I don't often see him with a lack of composure, but he's walking off the court. He's starting to panic, talk to the referee here, maybe with some good cause because he got the ball on his racket. But, he looked before that, he looked edgy, he looked a bit panicky, and it was all a bit loose. So I think that's not very Rami-like. And suddenly it's back to 10-all, and he's sort of lost his five match balls there from 10-all. And from almost thinking I've won this a second ago, he was like 3 or 4 minutes ago, suddenly he's in a position where he could lose this now. 10-all. And I think, what would you do here? What would you do here? Well, I mean, you'd like to think you've got a bit of a plan, but again, I think these guys here is such an unusual situation. They're just going to be really patient. You can see that in this rally. Not really taking any high risk on. In the first game, that would have almost definitely been a cross-court nick attempt. Now it's just trying to be a bit more patient and attack when there's only a really good opportunity to attack. They're so tired at this point here, especially Rami with all that time off, I imagine. So, although Shabagi did do a lot of work to get to this point. This is pretty patient stuff. Pretty patient stuff. There's a bit of physicality, and that one ends up in a let. Right, I'm just going to move it on a little bit here. I think it's a review. Right, I've moved it on for those. I'm on 123.45. And they're here to get to. This was a terrible call by the ref, which easily provokes us into another conversation about how do you deal with poor decisions from the referee. Well, in the professional game, they were pretty lucky because they can ask for a player review. And if this was a junior match, you wouldn't really be getting that. But that was given as a let, and it gets overruled into a no let. Minimal interference. Ball goes to the back. Lovely little hold and flick by Rami. So 11-10 now to Rami, like his 6th match ball. And just interesting to see kind of the tactics between the points, how they're both taking their time. Shabagi's hitting a few balls up and down the wall. He wants to break the rhythm. He doesn't want to give his opponent any kind of rhythm to that. And likewise, there's just mind games between the two of them. Like, I can hold it off the most. I can make you wait. And I think it's such a mental battle at this point, isn't it? 11-10. I love this rally from Shabagi. The intensity's gone up from him. If you just watch him, look at his movement. He's on it. He wants to hit it hard, get on it early. Bang, bang. And then he's looking at his strength again. That's come right into slot for his strength. 11-10, match ball down, and he's gone for that with some severity. Taking it way out in front, chopped it in. I think, again, he's relying on his strengths, and there's a couple of strengths coming through in that rally. There's that physicality of getting on the ball early, hitting it hard, and then taking it into his favourite area. So I think that was a really good one to highlight the strengths. So 11-all. There are a few lets and stuff like that. You'd expect that, I guess, in the situation. Generally, what I do with what I tell the juniors to do is when they're doing the sort of the court analysis and they're writing winners and errors down, is I would generally say don't worry too much about the lets and the lets. I'd write down no let and error, stroke. That one just ends up in a let, but I wouldn't annotate that on a diagram. I might talk about it in my scoreboard, like as in it. I put in mine it was a high quality rally from both, but I wouldn't really sort of let it interrupt, because I'm really, with the winners and errors, I'm just trying to look at exactly that, where the winners and errors come from, not particularly the let and traffic issues and things like that. I'll try and keep them separate. So this, again, pretty high quality. So after a bit of a panic from Rami, I think this is back on high quality, but then loose ball comes out and he panics again. So I think this is pretty unusual. I just love that fighting spirit there from Shabagi, getting back into it. Like, forced a stroke out of it. He's pretty street smart, getting a lot of strokes and stuff like that out of this. And now he's got a match ball. So he's saved 6 match balls. Now he's got a match ball. And if that doesn't scream out fighting spirit from somebody, then I don't know what does. So I think such an amazing role model in terms of fighting spirit and sheer determination and guts, perseverance through bag years. He might not be a great role model in some other ways, but maybe creativity. You're more looking at Ramy, but that is brilliant. Right, so here I think again what we're watching 11-12. I think there's another let coming, but there's so many straight attacks from Ramy. Not really something you'd associate with him. And if you watch the rest of the matches, he's almost playing alley games here. Just looks like an alley game with an option. And he's coming in, bit of hold again, resorts back to that. He's using his strengths now. Alley game, get it tight. Bang. Well, I suppose alley game isn't his strength, but that hold certainly is. Hold, send him to the back, and it worked again. Good thing I'd say to juniors about running it in tight is you're just giving your opponent fewer options on that. If you're, especially with Ramy here, if he goes cross-court nick, it feeds into Shabagi's main strength, which is his front forehand. So as soon as he misses it, he's in real trouble, and he can't afford to be in trouble here. Again, great stuff here from Ramy. Decided to go straight on that volley drop. And that ends up in a let. It's pretty streetwise there from Shabagi again, to end up in a let. They bring this, so I'm going to move it on a few seconds here, because the sweepers come on court. Oh, gone too far. So 12 all, Shabagi again threatening. And there's a big error there from Shabagi, but Ramy, to be fair, has stuck to his plan, which is to take him backhand volley straight. And that's just, I'll just say that's pressure. Very rarely going to miss those kind of things. 13-12, match ball. We'll watch this all the way through to the end now. I think sometimes on these ones, a match like this is such a high quality match and so entertaining that I want the juniors to be entertained by it. And want them to find that kind of love of the sport and not be all just writing stuff down and completely analytical about it. That one there is given as a no-let initially and then gets overturned. And I just think that, that's another good opportunity to talk about, the difficulties with refereeing and how to cope with refs. I mean, I think if you look at the way that Ramy in particular kind of doesn't panic too much when he's talking to refs. It's such a high pressure situation. I think he's a pretty good role model here. He's very fair. A lot of the Egyptian players are actually very fair. I love watching Shabana as well. I think he was one of the fairest players ever. So I think sometimes they get tarred with the wrong brush. That ends up as a let ball, which kind of is just a huge decision. But these days, actually, since 2014, there have been a lot of refereeing changes. That could easily have been a stroke if it was 2019, 2020. Ends up as a let. Again, walking to the front wall, bit of mind games, taking his time, not afraid of the pressure. Actually get the wrong side here, which would have been awkward if they'd had to play a let on this. So I think this is his seventh or eighth match ball. And there you go, he's won it, goes bounding around again on a straight drop. I think it's brilliant how he's stuck to his tactics in that 5th game and had such discipline to stick to going straight and actually kind of ignoring his natural instinct to stop sharing that there. Natural instinct to attack with all sorts of different angles and be a flair player and be creative. And he's really reined it back in. And I think that's a really good example to show to kids how you can tactically change in a match if they watch the difference between the first match and the first game and the 5th game, and sort of see what's kind of obviously going on in the mind of one of the best players ever. Okay, so I think what we're going to do now is open it up to some questions from the floor. If we've got time, Cyrus, is that all right?
Yes, we have time. Would you prefer them?
I can't hear you
typing
there,
it in?
Cyrus. Sorry.
Do you prefer them typing it in or speaking? I don't know. We normally are doing typing in, but if we want to go one by one, if somebody can ask questions, shall we experiment with that and see how it goes?
So if you've got any questions, put them in the chat, and I'll try and answer as many as I can. I'm not sure what Cyrus said there. Actually, I couldn't hear you. Sorry.
Okay, so can you hear me? Abhinav, can you hear me?
Working. I'll give you a call, Cyrus.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Chris.
Oh, I can't hear you.
You can't hear on. Okay, so then we better just get the chat. We'll just get it through the chat. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Please put your questions in the chat if you all have
New technology is not my friend.
for match analysis. Or Chris, you can just take out the. Or just put it like that. Can you hear now, Chris?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's better, isn't it?
Okay. Okay, so if anyone has any specific questions to ask on tactics analysis, if they want to type it in, or if there's just one or two, we can get someone to speak. No one? Okay, then I'll ask a question.
Yeah, sure.
You did say about writing things down. Do you do that? Do you do that when you're on tour with your players? Would you be writing down every match?
Not every match, no. I generally take notes on because I know my players quite well. So when I go around with my juniors to tournaments, I know my players pretty well. So what I'll do is I'll kind of have a page for each player and just kind of maybe split it into tactical. Like I'd probably do the overview there for what I'm watching there. So I do the annotated scoreline for when I'm watching a match online more. But if I'm out and about at a tournament, I'll probably just take notes on each player.
Okay, Chris Robertson writes down every point.
Yes, but he's a workaholic.
Yeah. So that's quite amazing what he does. Do you know what all he does? Because how does he get everything written down in there?
Well, I think you've got to have pretty good shorthand for that, haven't you? And have kind of little, like I just write FH beforehand, for example, but I'm sure he's got lots and lots of those kind of little ways of jargon and understanding what he's going to do. And I think the more you do of that kind of stuff, the better. And it doesn't surprise me that Chris Robertson does that because he's such a thorough person. And I suppose you're gonna struggle to get juniors to do that, because they don't really love writing stuff down in particular. But it's the same principle as keeping a training diary. Well, I find when players keep a training diary, they seem to have so much more self-awareness and they have so much more direction in where they're going as players. So I think it's very much along the same lines of analysis.
So just speaking on that from your experience, do all the top players do it, or generally what I have observed, it's the players who are the number 2s, 3s, 4s, they are the ones who want to keep that diary, or maybe even the number 8s. It's the number 1s and 2s sometimes don't use the diary as much. That's my reading of it.
Well, I think that I don't know what all the top players do, but I have spent a fair bit of time with quite a few top players, and I think that they are looking for any way they can improve. any way they can improve, and they will try everything. So some players might think it doesn't work for them, and it might not work for them. But I think that if you don't try it and it could have helped you, well, you've missed something, haven't you? So you might as well try to do it and give it a proper go, like do it at least 5 or 6 times, and then see if it's actually improving your understanding of what's happening. If you get to a stage where you do it a lot and you can actually do it when you're in your head and you don't need to write things down, well, that's great. That's great. But I think at the start, it's so much simpler to keep a sort of idea in your head of what's happening there.
Okay, I'm going through some of the chat questions. The first one up here is, generally, what would your strategy be at 10-all?
Okay, so I don't think you can be too specific in terms of, say, you're going to play certain shots, but kind of like I alluded to in the talk and the presentation, I think you've got to be prepared that the intensity is going to go up. So I think that means that people are hitting it marginally harder, they're taking it marginally earlier, and they're thinking much more about taking risk out of the situation. So my tactics personally was to try and put my opponent on the back foot. That's how I was thinking in my head, is I've got to put my opponent on the back foot. By that, I think, right, I've got to take the tee away from them. I've got to dominate play. And generally, I went with straight attacks. So I did straighten up quite a bit. Different players had different styles. I remember I loved the John Power DVD where back in the day when I watched that, where he said, I always attack with a straight kill on match balls and then look to follow up and get a stroke. And I just thought, well, he's got a plan. And even if it doesn't go to plan, then he could win with the straight kill. And the way he's playing that straight kill is he's playing it a bit more margin above the tin rather than going down there, which he might do in the rest of the match, and then trying to run it tight into the side wall. So he's got a different way of winning, which is probably going to cut down errors and try and get his opponent scraping off the wall. Bit of a loose shot, looks for a stroke. So he had a plan. But then other players, I remember I played Ong Beng Hee, who was a top 10 player, and I watched him play quite a few tight matches, and I remember he used this little hold and flick across, his backhand flick at the front corner on match ball. I watched him do that 3 or 4 different times, and I thought, if I ever play him, I'll watch out for that. And then I got to a tiebreak in the 5th in like a league match with him, and he did it to me to win the match as well, and I just didn't see it coming. So, like, you know, you can prepare all you like. I knew it was coming before the point, and I still didn't see it when it came along and he beat me. So that's probably not a great example to take, but people just tend to. Some people have a real plan. Other people, I don't think, have such a plan. You know, but I think a philosophy is important. Like, be prepared for the intensity to go really high. Be prepared for people to be very cautious sometimes. But other players, like quite often, Shabaghi goes very ultra attacking in and kind of shows how he's prepared to take on risk at that point. And you know, he's got the philosophy of, I think, like, if I'm going to go for it, I'm going to go for it 100% rather than just kind of tentatively, nervously put it in there. So I think that's a very bold statement in tie breaks. So I think I've seen Shabaghi do that quite a bit.
Sure. Okay, next one. When the player is better than our student, what are the best things a coach can say to their student?
Well, I think there's a lot of positives to take out from any match, aren't there? And if you're going into a match, what can you take? Well, I remember going on, and when I was sort of a young pro, 17, 18, and training with guys in the top 50, and I thought that the more time I spend on court with these guys, the more I'll learn. So I just tried to make the rallies as long as possible. I tried to get to my physical limit. I think the worst thing you can do is not fight for every point. I genuinely think the worst thing you can do is just kind of go, well, this guy's too good for me, and you know, effectively kind of giving them half the points for free. And when you really sort of just go, right, I'm just going to do what I can do and get stuck into this match as much as I can, and I'll do anything I can to stay on court as long as I can. And then I'll just get used to the pace. I'll get used to the different shots, and maybe they're not as scary as I thought. So I think for me, it's making the time of the match as long as possible, and that will give you the best chance of of kind of feeling more confident next time you go on court with them.
Okay. How many old videos would you recommend your players to analyze a match? So, would you? The question I'm not 100% clear. Is it old as in 5-year-old videos, or But you recommend players to watch matches?
Yeah, we've so
and
one of the first ones we watched in lockdown was
put it
the Shabana match, and I was amazed that Shabana is my hero in terms of squash, and I was amazed that the juniors and they're kind of 13, 14, 15, that kind of age, and they didn't really know Shabana just because he's retired, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, and he's just a beautiful player to watch. And I was a bit disappointed really then. So I was kind of pleased to be able to show them this guy. And then likewise, I mean, I love watching Jancho. I just thought he was amazing. I love watching Dittmar, Rodney Martin, loads of players from previous eras. John Power was amazing. Peter Nicol, great player. So I think there's so much to be able to sort of educate your players in. And this is a great way of doing it. Although the quality of the stream is quite often really bad for those old matches, which is a shame. But like I say, there's always something like the footwork of Jancha that you can get out of these matches.
Okay, could you? Someone's asked for the major points you should keep in mind while analyzing your match. You started with it, so could you give your golden rules once again?
My golden rules, okay. I should be able to remember them, shouldn't I, if they're golden rules? But hang on. My number 1 was write things down. Number 2 was focus on one player at a time. I think for me that's a really important one. Number 3 is be able to relate it to yourself. So be able to imagine how you'd be thinking in that situation, how you might have changed your technique yourself or your movement in particular. And number 4 was kind of just one to say don't watch highlights. Or don't watch only highlights, I suppose. You want to watch the full match, full depth of play, and understand the subtlety in the match. Those were my fault. But we can send this up. I've written my presentation down, so I can send it on to people, and you're happy to forward it.
So this means when we are analyzing matches and when players want to learn, should they watch more of their own matches or should they watch PSA matches?
I think a mix. I think a lot of junior players I find don't enjoy watching themselves play because they're quite emotionally attached to it. And I can understand that we don't particularly like seeing our faults in on screen and visible for everyone to see. But if you're determined to learn, then that's what you've got to do. And I think you should be watching a mix. So obviously there's going to be quite a big disparity between a 13-year-old junior and world number 1s and 2s that you might be watching. But even if they can pick up, if they have an open mind and they want to pick up 1 or 2 things, then that's a great asset to have. So a mix, I think a mix.
Okay. Is there any app which helps us analyze matches?
Yes. Coach's Eye is a really good one, actually. So you can get a free version or you can pay for the one without ads and stuff in it. Coach's Eye, what you can do with that, I mentioned it briefly, is you can upload a video into it and do it in slow motion, which is fantastic for squash, which is, we've got such a quick game that it's really useful to be able to do slow motion squash. And then you can do little things like draw lines on it, or I might use that to see how far one player is moving away from the tee, or to just put a circle to kind of highlight the area where there's the space, or show, for example, when a player threatens to hit one corner but then actually hits the other corner, I might draw on the screen where they're threatening to hit and then where they hit. But these things are very time consuming to do. So that if you're doing multiple ones of these per week, then I think that's quite difficult to do. So you better make it kind of worthwhile, I suppose. But Coach's Eye is a really good one for having privately, I suppose, if you were doing a one-on-one lesson as well.
Okay, next question. The match was very tough. How can the player improve and maintain patience during the match?
Yeah, well, I think patience and discipline go hand in hand. So it's going to come back to your training, isn't it? And for me, nothing really beats doing pressure sessions where you're just constantly under pressure feeds from a coach. And, I would generally time those kind of sessions. And I always felt like I saw the results in my matches. So when I went through a period of, or when I would go through a period of hard training with another player or a coach feeding me repeatedly tough, then I felt like I trained so hard that what's the point in throwing in a risky shot that's going to clip the tin? Then I was kind of thinking, why would I waste my physicality on this risky shot? I'm looking for not just winning this rally, but I'm looking for winning the match. I'm looking for long-term gain. And that attitude is why I was able to be quite disciplined on a court. And I think I was a fairly disciplined player. So I think basically it's in your training, isn't it? It's in the style of your training. And you've got to be kind of, if you've got a junior that's ill-disciplined, then that's what you can prove on a squash court as a coach. You can say, look, we're going to do a half an hour session of constant feeding. You've got to get back to the tee every time. And if you can't do it, well, watch this match with Ramy and Shabagi, and that's an hour and a quarter of absolutely brutal squash. Good luck, hitting a load of nicks against these guys because they'll come back. So I think that's kind of where I'd be taking that one. I'd be going down the hard training route.
Okay. You have planned strategy against your opponent after analyzing his weaknesses, but in the match you are unable to implement the plan.
Yeah. I think this is pretty common. It's a game plan, and maybe the game plan wasn't the right one or wasn't in depth enough, and it happens all the time. And then your game plan might change between games or on the spot. So I think what the question is maybe asking there is kind of identifying the skill of and the confidence to be able to change a game plan and knowing what basic game plans are. So, for example, keeping everything tight, or playing a higher percentage straight and short, or using a boast to twist and turn, or using hold to delay movement. Those might all be tactics that you use. And it's having the confidence that you can A, technically do that, and B, then it's kind of the right time to do that in a match. So these are really difficult skills when your heart rate is up at 180 plus, and you've got to think strategically. This is why the game's so great, isn't it? So you've got to think strategically about how you're going to subtly change your game and start including more boasts, maybe, to twist and turn your opponent. Now, there's not many players that are doing that, thinking like that in a game. I think there's quite a few players that will do that in between games, and maybe with some help from a coach, change their tactics slightly to be able to do that. I don't see even many pros change in a game in a high pressure situation. So to see that obviously quite obvious in a way, like we saw with Ramy changing to straight attacks there, that's really difficult. It's really difficult. It takes so much experience and foresight to be able to do. So of course we can encourage it. Definitely we want to encourage that as coaches. But I think the easier thing to do is to start by maybe talking about how you're going to change your tactics between games. That's probably an easier conversation to have with a junior player, in my opinion.
Okay, this is. Should you play with a new racket in a match, or should you play with your old racket?
Oh, old racket every time. Okay. I wouldn't be changing my racket just before a match. No, I don't think Ramy changed his for his whole career, really, did he?
Okay. What should you focus most in match analysis? We did answer that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you like, really. I think that's the thing. I would watch a match through several times, and one time I might be focusing on footwork, and another time I might be focusing on the variation of shots. Another time I might be focusing on the sort of shortening of a swing or the technique or threat. So you can watch it lots of different times with lots of different angles of kind of how you're approaching the match.
How much video analysis would you do with the players during a tournament?
None. I don't think I don't remember a time where I do any of my own. I wouldn't be kind of analysing my own particularly, but I know some players that do. So I think it's completely personal preference. But for me, I wouldn't be looking at the match I just played immediately. I'd need some time to kind of calm down on it, and I want to focus on the next player. If anything, I might watch. There would be the odd occasion where I was getting through to a round where I was playing a player that I didn't think was going to get there, and I'd never played before. So I would then go on YouTube or Squash TV and find that player in a sort of an emergency. But if I know the player at all, then I've done all my homework before the tournament. So I kind of feel like if I was doing that during the tournament, I'd feel like it was a sense of panic. And I think that my homework's done before the tournament is kind of how I perceived it. But like I say, personal preference.
At what age would you introduce match review analysis as part of a session?
Well, the youngest I think we've had is 11-year-olds on my ones that I've been doing over the last month. And some of them have been brilliant. I've got to say, some of those young kids have been absolutely fantastic, and they've had some really insightful things to say about it. So that's not been a problem. And I haven't really talked to much younger about that because they're not in my kind of remit, I suppose, for England squash. But some of the kids I coach to, like I use a lot where I get an iPad or a phone and video player when I'm doing a one-on-one coaching lesson and just show them how they're hitting a drop shot, get them to do some solo practice, hit a drop shot, and then replay it to them and show them that, you know, their posture or their swing's too big or where the ball's going or whatever really. So I think that's still video analysis, and I think it's one that we've all got, or nearly all of us have got access to. It's a very, very useful thing, and I've done that with really pretty young kids, like 8, 9 years old. So I don't think there's a problem doing it, but obviously you've just got to do what's appropriate for their age, haven't you? And just kind of keep it simple. You don't want to be going into too much depth for a 10-year-old, I wouldn't have thought.
So which means how often should one do match analysis if there's no tournaments coming up?
Well, I think that's when you can do plenty. That's when you can do really lots and lots. I mean, so in lockdown, I mean, we could be watching matches every day. I mean, some kids that I coach are like quite obsessive about squash and they just love it. And they're just watching matches all the time. And I still would want them not watching a match just for the enjoyment of it, because I love the game and I want them to love the game and I don't want it to become homework. But I think they could do as much as they wanted. I don't think there's a limit really. I think they could take it as far as they wanted.
So when they watch their matches, what are the key aspects you want out from them? So suppose you tell children, go and watch a match and come back to me tomorrow. Do you have a template of what is it that you want them to see?
I'm quite happy for them to see what they want to get out of it. And I suppose if they've just focused and fixated on, let's say, movement, then what I'll try and do is maybe get them to do that player breakdown where we've got the sort of 5 major areas of squash, like technique, mentality, physicality, tactics. So then I will then try and ask them a few questions on these other subjects and try and make sure that they've got kind of a breadth of knowledge rather than just too specific. So if I feel they're just going down one route, then I'll try and engage them in going down another couple of ideas, I suppose.
Okay. A few more questions. What is the best strategy a player should follow when the set score is 2-all?
Well, I think to go out hard in a fifth game is important. I often think that the person who gets to 5 points wins that in the fifth game, wins that fifth game most of the time. If you get a good start in a fifth game, then more often than not, you will win that game, and you can break somebody mentally then. And you come out hard, you show them that you're, stronger than they are, and they can fade away and give you a couple of cheap points. It doesn't always happen clearly, but I think to come out really positive, if you have on the other side, if you have a bad start to a fifth game, you've put in so much work into that match, and then it can go just for the sake of a few points where you haven't really pushed and you haven't expected your opponent to come out fighting for that fifth. So I think it's all about attitude at the start of the fifth game.
So another question based on this, your skills are better, you got better technique and skills, but you are knackered. What's your tactic?
Well, the worst thing you can do is just to try and go for winners all the time, because if they're any good, if your opponent's any good, then they're going to pick up most of your attempted shots from the back and just counter drop it, and you're going to end up doing court sprints backwards and forwards, and then you're going to end up even more knackered. So you have got to be disciplined enough to lift the ball, get it tight. The important thing is to get it tight, stop your opponent attacking. You're kind of hoping a little bit for that loose ball, and when you've got a little bit of position, or hopefully a good position, then you go for your shot. But yes, slow the pace down, but you've got to get it tight, you've got to stop them attacking, and you've got to get some sort of position still before you attack. If you're just going for winners, well, you're either a better player than me if you're hitting them and winning, or it's just not going to work. So I still think, of course, go for one or two if you need to, but I think you still need some position.
Okay, to play the best, how old should your strings be for getting good control? And what's the tension do you recommend?
I don't know. Beyond me, that. I've heard that Gaultier, for example, uses extremely loose strings, which would help you get a lot of power, but you'd lose control. But he seems like such an accurate player that I don't know what to believe there. But players have their own varied ideas on this kind of stuff. I went pretty mid-range. I like strings that were played in, though. I didn't like new strings. But that's about the only strong opinion I had. So
it varies. Some like it loose, some like it very tight. I've known people who go up to 30, 32 pounds tension. So that's it.
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier, and it's just asked again, do you really feel it's worthwhile watching the same match a second or third time, watching different aspects like footwork and so on?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you watch these matches again and again, and you'll get more of the subtlety out of it. There's so much going on at players of this quality that we're watching that you're probably better off watching one match 5 times than 5 matches once, would be my opinion on it. And I think you'll get a better understanding of that match and what's happened. You'll start thinking about and trying to kind of get an understanding of how the player thinks, really kind of get that tactics in there and understand their game so much better. So, yes, 100%.
Okay. Which PSA player's footwork would you recommend for people to watch?
Well, these days, I'd probably watch Farag is an amazing mover. Raneem El Walili is just fantastic. We've been watching a few matches of hers where she plays El Guna, actually. El Guna in 2018, there's some great women's matches where she plays she plays El Taib, and then she plays Shabini in the final. And she's just an amazing mover. She's very, very smooth. So I think actually she'd be up there with Farag, and then Gawad. Gawad is very, very efficient. He's not the most athletic player, although he's pretty good athletically, but he's just super efficient and reads the game beautifully and just moves. He glides around the court. But if you go back a bit further back, then Peace Nichols a great mover to watch, and then Jancha was a fantastic mover. But to be honest, most top players are going to be pretty good at moving. Rami's a great mover, but he's obviously hindered by a hamstring issue, so he can't really lunge into the front that much. But in terms of his pace of movement, Nick Matthew, he was a great mover side to side, so relentlessly volleying cross side to side. So Diego would be another one now who's very efficient. I like his style of play and his movement. So Diego Elias.
Okay, final question for the day. Is there a sequence to do analysis with skill, technique, tactics, footwork, shot selection, match pressure, behavior? Is there any sequence you would follow?
Not particularly, no. I think it just depends what I'm trying to get across, really. If I want to see a more basic thing, then I'll use my diagram, just where people's strengths and weaknesses are, and I might use that sort of annotated diagram. I think I tend to let the juniors do what they enjoy doing first, and then to encourage them to try and kind of broaden their horizons next. Because not everybody likes writing these kind of things down. It'd be probably more enjoyable. It seems like work, doesn't it, sometimes, I guess, to these juniors to actually write things down. So if I can get them just to engage and enjoy it, and actually do some work, then that's my main thing. So whatever they enjoy is what I want out of it.
All right, I think that's it, Chris. That's as much time as we have, and I think you've really given us a lot of insight into match analysis. I think it's been fabulous. Thank you so much for your time. And we hope to see you in India soon again.
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed it. So thanks, everyone. Nice to see on my screen quite a few familiar faces. So I'm really looking forward to getting back and coming back over to India and seeing you guys again. So thanks very much for inviting me. Enjoyed it. So see you on a squash court soon.
Okay, thank you, and see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow we've got fitness testing, so another exciting workshop tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Cyrus and Chris. Thank you. Good day.
Thanks, Chris. Stay safe.